What are you thinking for a date? I mean, depending on, I guess
we'll see what I was looking to do. So I hadn't really thought that far in advance. This is State of Wisconsin versus Darrell Brooks Jr., case 20 CF 2550, also calling 21 CF 4596 and 21 CF 5020. Appearances?
State appears by Jacob Corr and Michelle Grasso.
Attorney Robert Hampton appears with Attorney William Rakestraw with Mr. Brooks. Good afternoon, Your Honor.
Good afternoon. Mr. Brooks's cases were scheduled today before this branch and branch 10 for final pretrials. Mr. Brooks is currently set for trial in both of these branches on December 12th. My understanding is during the course of the morning, both the state and defense counsels met with branch 10, Judge Havas, and there was a discussion about what would happen this afternoon, and it's my understanding that there's going to be a request that we postpone the December 12th trial dates. Is that accurate?
That is correct, Your Honor. We all know where Mr. Brooks has spent the last basic month, and over that month, just out of a courtesy, because he was focusing on other things, being his own attorney there in Waukesha, we didn't speak with him because he was busy. Since the verdict was read, got back in touch with Mr. Brooks, and we're speaking again and dealing with this case, but I'm asking for an adjournment so that we can now get into how we want to handle the case in front of Your Honor and also Judge Havas.
Mr. Corr and Ms. Grasso, is the state going to take a position on these requests?
No, Judge, given the circumstances, I don't think the state is going to object. The state would have been prepared on December 12th for these matters, but given the circumstances and the defense's inability to prepare, we're not going to object to the adjournment.
All right. At this point, from the court system's perspective, we've begun to make arrangements, and I discussed this briefly with counsel, with Mr. Corr today. The court had reached out to find larger, more dire space for December 12th, and we talked about Waukesha. The court had been kind enough to share a juror questionnaire. We talked about that, but I can't say that significant enough efforts have been made that it would cause problems to move these matters. And given the circumstances here in the events of the last month in Waukesha County, the court does understand why it would have been difficult for Mr. Rakestraw and Mr. Hampton to meet with Mr. Brooks and coordinate strategy on these matters. So for those reasons, the court will grant the request to adjourn these matters. Mr. Hampton and Mr. Rakestraw, at this point, should we be looking at setting new trial and final pretrial dates, or do you think the cases are going to move in a different direction?
At this point, I guess we set a status date so that we can figure out how we want to move forward and also discuss any possible plans, any possible options with the state if those exist.
Mr. Corr and Ms. Grasso, do you want to weigh in on that?
I don't have a position on that, Judge.
All right. From the court's perspective, that's appropriate because I think clearly if we end up setting another trial date for Mr. Brooks, that has to be the, in capital letters, trial date for these matters, and it's going to take a fair amount of preparation on behalf of the state, a fair amount of preparation on behalf of the defense, and a fair amount of preparation on behalf of the court system. And so I think that setting a status date to make sure that that's where we're going to go. I also think that on that status date, we'd set the matters in both courts on December 12th. And it may be that in the future we need to revisit setting the matters on the same date in both calendars. That's a decision that state defense and Judge Havas and I can continue to discuss. But at this point, I do think it's appropriate to set these matters for a status hearing. Given the Thanksgiving holiday and the holidays that follow, realistically, Mr. Hampton, Mr. Rakestraw, and counsel for the state, how much time until we know where we're going on these?
If you look at the second week of January, is that possible?